My name is Lena Hart. I'm 27, a product designer in New York, and today my career is on trial because two men in this room couldn't keep their feelings off slack. It's Q4 review day. Fluorescent lights buzz overhead, the projector hums, and every chair around this glass conference table is filled. HR sits across from me, laptop open. My manager, Caleb, stares at a spot on the wall. Miles, the designer who accidentally outed him, won't look up at all. Olivia from HR clears her throat. "We need to talk about your relationship with your manager." That's the moment I realize I've been here before, just not like this. Before I go any further, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever had a toxic boss, a jealous coworker, or been blamed for something you didn't do at work. I read the comments, and you'd be surprised how many office stories sound just like this. Because what happened in that conference room didn't start there. It started months earlier, on a crowded subway headed into Manhattan. I used to think New York would make me feel bigger, but most mornings, it just made me feel small. Another tired 20-something clinging to an iced coffee on a packed Brooklyn-bound subway, trying to pretend I wasn't drowning under rent, student loans, and the pressure of being the first in my family to make it in tech. On the day everything really began, I stood wedged between a man in a suit scrolling through emails and a teenage girl sketching buildings in a notebook. My AirPods played soft indie music, but my mind kept replaying a promise I'd made to myself the year before. No more office romance. No more getting attached to the wrong person. No more letting a man cost me my reputation. I still remember the snap of the turnstile, the cold air as I climbed the subway stairs into Soho, and the way sunlight hit the glass facade of our building like a spotlight. I felt hopeful, almost steady. Back then, I honestly believed this company would be different, that I would be different. My badge photo was awful, washed out, my hair frizzing in a way I didn't understand yet was just New York humidity. But when I tapped into the office that first day, I felt something warm in my chest. A fresh start, a clean file, no past rumors following me around like a shadow. The office smelled like burnt coffee and whiteboard markers. Open space, long shared desks, people in neutral-colored sweaters and wide-leg pants, the soft clicking of mechanical keyboards. It felt young, ambitious, messy in a way that made me feel like maybe I belonged. Then he walked toward me. Caleb Rivers. I didn't know then that he would become the axis around which my entire career, and almost my entire life, would tilt. He offered a handshake, firm but not oversized, and smiled like he'd been waiting for me. "Lena, right? Welcome. I've heard good things." He said it lightly, casually, but something in me straightened. Someone had spoken about me before I arrived. Someone had set an expectation. And Caleb looked at me like he believed it. He wore a navy shirt and dark trousers, all clean lines and quiet confidence. Not flashy, not loud, just someone used to holding a room without forcing it. He walked me to my desk, introducing me to the team. "This is Miles, one of our senior UI designers. You two will be collaborating a lot." Miles didn't stand up. He just lifted his gaze from his screen, smirked, and said, "So you're the new favorite." I laughed awkwardly. Caleb shot him a warning look, but Miles didn't seem to care. His dark hair was slightly messy, like he'd run his hands through it one too many times, and a small geometric tattoo wrapped around his wrist. He looked like the kind of guy who broke rules beautifully, then dared someone to stop him. "Don't mind him," Caleb told me softly as we moved on. He thinks sarcasm is a personality trait, but Miles's eyes followed me as I walked away. Later, I would understand why. My first week was a blur of onboarding, Slack channels, and frantic attempts to understand our Figma files, which looked like a rainbow exploded on top of a city map. I stayed quiet, observing more than speaking. It's what I've always done. Growing up in New Jersey, in a house where everyone talked over everyone else, I learned early that silence gave you power. Silence lets you see things others missed. On Friday, Caleb pulled me aside after stand-up. "Do you want to help with a design review for one of our enterprise clients? It's a good chance for visibility." He said it like it was nothing, but for someone at my level, It meant everything. I said yes before I could think, and that was the beginning. The following Tuesday, we were both still at the office past 9. The open floor was nearly empty, the hum of the AC louder without chatter to drown it out. My eyes burned from staring at screens, and my fingers were stiff from adjusting components and flow lines. I kept telling myself I could finish, that I didn't need help, that asking for help would make me look incompetent. But Caleb noticed anyway. "You should take a break," he said, standing beside my desk. "Long hours make diminishing returns. Trust me." I wanted to tell him I couldn't afford diminishing returns, that women in design get judged twice as harshly for half the mistakes, that the money I earned barely covered rent and loan payments, that I couldn't be anything less than perfect. Instead, I just nodded. He brought coffee, real espresso, not the watery office stuff, and handed it to me. Our fingers brushed. Only a second, but enough to feel something electric, unwelcome, uninvited, yet undeniably real. We worked quietly after that, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something woody, something expensive, something that didn't belong anywhere near my pulse. Around 11 p.m., I finally pushed away from my desk. "This looks good," Caleb said. "Really good. You have strong instincts. Don't second-guess them." He walked me to the elevator. It was too quiet, too intimate, too much. I told myself it was just mentorship. I told myself it didn't mean anything. I told myself I was safe. I was wrong. And the truth is, the story could have ended there if it hadn't been for Miles. If Caleb was the steady, quiet force pulling me in, then Miles was the spark I didn't see coming. A week after our late-night design review, I found myself in the office again after hours, not because I was assigned to stay, but because I couldn't focus at home. The open floor was dim except for rows of desk lamps glowing like tiny islands in the dark. Someone had left a container of Thai leftovers in the microwave, and the smell of basil and garlic filled the space. I was adjusting spacing in a mobile flow when I heard footsteps behind me. "Still here?" Miles asked, dropping into the chair beside mine with a sigh. He spun slightly, tapping his sneaker against the leg of my desk. "I needed to fix a few things," I said. "You always need to fix a few things." His tone was teasing, but his eyes were softer than usual. "You know perfection is a myth, right?" Says the man who spent 20 minutes picking a button shade. He laughed, genuine, warm, familiar in a way I hadn't expected, and then he rolled his chair closer, nudging his knee against mine as he leaned over my screen. "Show me what you're fighting with." The way he said fighting sent a small jolt through me. I wasn't used to someone noticing the struggle, only the result. We spent the next hour debating tiny details no one but designers would care about: spacing, typography, hover states. At one point, he reached over me to adjust the brightness on my monitor, and the sleeve of his sweatshirt brushed my shoulder. My pulse jumped before I could stop it. When he finally leaned back, stretching his arms behind his head, he said, "Let's call it. You're going to start hating this if you stare at it any longer." He wasn't wrong. Outside, rain hammered against the windows. Miles glanced at his phone. "Subway's a mess. Want to split an Uber to Brooklyn?" I hesitated, but he wasn't my boss. He wasn't a danger to my career. He wasn't Caleb. "Sure," I said. The car ride was quiet at first. City lights reflected on the wet pavement, painting the interior of the car in shifting blues and yellows. Miles rested his elbow on the door, watching the skyline blur by. "You're good, you know," he said suddenly. Caleb wasn't exaggerating. "You see patterns other people miss." It was such a simple compliment. No agenda, no pressure, just honesty. And in that moment, it felt more intimate than anything that had happened in that quiet meeting room with Caleb. When the car dropped me off first, Miles didn't ask for anything, didn't linger. He just said, "Get some sleep, heart," and gave me that crooked half smile that always made him look like he knew something I didn't. If that had been the end of it, maybe none of this would have spiraled. But offices have gravity, and people orbit whoever they can't stop thinking about. Caleb kept giving me bigger projects. He'd walk by my desk to ask a question he could have easily slacked. He'd sit beside me in critiques, close enough that our chairs brushed. And whenever he spoke to me, it felt like the rest of the room sharpened, eyes watching, whispers forming. Miles noticed too. Every time Caleb approached, I'd feel Miles glance over from across the room. Sometimes his expression was unreadable, other times it wasn't. Meanwhile, Brianna shifted from polite curiosity to something colder. I caught her once in the pantry with Logan, talking in low voices until they saw me. She smiled wide, too wide, and said, "Oh, we were just discussing resource allocation. Nothing about you." Nothing about me. A sure sign it was about me. I started hearing fragments of conversations when I walked into rooms. She's always with him. You don't get opportunities like that unless... I'm not saying she's doing anything wrong, but optics matter. I pretended not to hear, pretended I didn't feel my stomach twist every time someone looked at me a little too long. One afternoon, during a client walkthrough, Caleb asked me to present the new UI direction. My hands shook slightly as I clicked through the slides, but he nodded at me with quiet encouragement. Afterward, one of the engineers whispered, "He never lets anyone else present. Ever." I wished I didn't like hearing that as much as I did. The shift really happened at the company happy hour. The rooftop bar was crowded, warm with string lights and music vibrating through wooden floors. People were 2 drinks in, talking louder, laughing easier. Caleb found me near the railing and stood beside me, close enough that our arms almost touched. "You okay?" he asked. "You seemed tense earlier." "It's just been a long week." He nodded, then said quietly, "You're doing exceptional work, Lena. I don't say that lightly." The air between us changed, charged, fragile. He looked at me not like a manager evaluating performance, but like a man trying to decide if he should step closer. Before I could respond, I heard the unmistakable click of a phone camera. At the time, I didn't know who had taken that photo. Later, I would find out it was Brianna, her expression unreadable, her intentions anything but innocent. That photo would end up in a private side-channel chat. That chat would eventually surface in a way no one expected. And that moment, 2 people standing a little too close on a rooftop, would become ammunition. But that night, I went home pretending everything was normal. At my apartment, Tara was on the couch editing photos for a freelance job. She paused when she saw me. "Long night? Office stuff?" She gave me a look that said she didn't buy it. "Lena, 2 men orbiting you like they're auditioning for a love triangle isn't office stuff. It's a problem." "I'm not in a love triangle." She raised an eyebrow. "Then why are you blushing?" I didn't have an answer, not one I was ready to admit out loud. But even then, in that tiny Brooklyn apartment filled with half-done laundry and leftover noodles, something in my chest fluttered, dangerously, stupidly, because for the first time in a long time, I felt wanted. I didn't know that feeling would eventually cost me far more than sleep. I didn't know that someone was already watching, already strategizing, already waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I didn't know that one Slack message would bring everything crashing down. Not yet. Not until it was too late. The Monday after the rooftop bar felt different. Not louder, not colder, just watchful. Like every conversation paused a half-second too long when I walked by. Like people were waiting for something to happen and were annoyed it wasn't happening fast enough. I kept my head down, opened Figma, and pretended the world wasn't whispering. But whispers have a way of becoming wind. The first gust came during a usability test debrief. We'd just wrapped a session with a major enterprise client, and something in the prototype hadn't worked correctly. A button routed to the wrong screen, confusing the participants. It was a small mistake, but in client work, small mistakes become large questions. Logan, our PM, was doing his usual post-test analysis, tapping a pen against his notebook. "So," he said slowly, "can someone walk me through why the flow wasn't updated from the final version before today?" Brianna turned her chair with the ease of someone who already knew how the conversation would unfold. "Well," she said lightly, "that was part of Lena's section. Maybe she can explain?" My throat tightened. "I made the updates on Thursday," I said carefully. "The flow was up to date when I left." Brianna tilted her head. "Are you sure? Because what we saw today wasn't aligned with what we reviewed." I opened my laptop, hands slightly shaking, and pulled up Figma. Version history confirmed it. Another change had been pushed Saturday night. A small adjustment, but enough to break the flow. And the edit was attributed to two names, Miles and Caleb. My stomach dropped. "It wasn't me," I said quietly. "Someone edited after the final review." Logan leaned forward. "Who?" Miles didn't look up. Caleb didn't either. The silence around the table grew heavy enough to feel like its own decision. When the meeting ended, no one said anything to me, not even Miles. He slipped out quickly, shoulders tight, headphones already in. Caleb lingered for a moment like he wanted to say something, then didn't. He just nodded at me once and left. And that was when I realized something terrifying. Being chosen comes with consequences. Being noticed comes with enemies. By Wednesday, the whispers had turned into shape. I walked into the pantry to heat leftover pasta, and the microwave door shut abruptly as two designers stopped talking mid-sentence. One of them gave me a tight smile, the kind people use when they want to pretend they weren't discussing you. "It must be nice," she said, stirring her tea, "having a manager who believes in you like that." Her friend snorted softly. "Believes? Is that what we're calling it?" I gripped my plastic fork so hard I thought it might snap. I told myself to breathe, to stay calm, to act like professionalism could protect me. But professionalism doesn't protect you when the story has already been written for you. That afternoon, a Slack notification popped up. A calendar invite. HR, quick check-in, 15 minutes. Sender, Olivia Sanders. My stomach twisted hard. HR offices always feel colder than the rest of the building. Olivia greeted me with a smile that was almost kind, almost warm, but not quite human. She motioned for me to sit. "I wanted to touch base about some concerns," she said, folding her hands neatly. "Purely routine, of course." Routine, the corporate word for panic. She clicked her pen. "There have been some perceptions around working hours, project assignments, and power dynamics on your team." My chest tightened. "Perceptions?" "Yes, particularly around your relationship with your manager." I froze. "We're not here to accuse you of anything," she said quickly. "This is just to ensure you feel comfortable and supported." The lie hung thick in the air. She asked about late-night revisions, about how often I worked with Caleb, about whether I ever felt pressured. Her voice was soothing, but her questions were sharp. I chose my words carefully. "I've only ever worked late because the deadlines required it, and I've never been pressured into anything inappropriate." Olivia nodded, writing something down. "Thank you for clarifying. We want to make sure you're safe, especially given certain patterns." "Patterns?" I repeated. She hesitated. "I can't share specifics, but I will say Caleb has received feedback in past roles about maintaining strong boundaries." My heart pounded so loud I thought she could hear it. Caleb's past. The rumors I'd overheard but hoped were exaggerations. Was I repeating someone else's mistake? When I got back to my desk, Miles wasn't there. His chair was angled away from his workstation, earbuds thrown on the desk like he'd left in a hurry. My Slack pinged, a message from him. "Can we talk?" I typed back. "About what?" A moment passed. "Please, just 5 minutes. Rooftop?" Against my better judgment, I went. He was waiting near the edge of the building, hands in the pockets of his bomber jacket, wind pushing his hair across his forehead. He looked nervous, and that unsettled me more than his usual sarcasm ever did. "I didn't know HR would escalate everything," he said quietly. "You didn't know your message would blow up? Or you didn't know they'd use it against me?" I asked, arms crossed. His jaw clenched. "I was trying to warn you, Lena. Caleb crosses lines. People have seen it before. That's not your call to make." "I care," he said simply, "more than I should." The words hung between us, trembling in the wind. For a moment, I didn't know if I wanted to yell at him or collapse into his arms. Because I cared too. Not enough to trust him. Not enough to believe he hadn't been reckless, but enough to feel the ground shifting beneath me. He looked at me then. Really looked. Like he was trying to tell me something he hadn't found the courage to say. But before either of us spoke again, the rooftop door opened. Brianna stepped out, holding a canned seltzer, eyebrows raised as if she'd stumbled into a private confession. "Oh," she said lightly, "am I interrupting something?" And in her smile, I saw it clearly. She already knew the answer. She was counting on it. She was waiting for the perfect moment to use it. The next morning, the office felt different again, tighter, as if the walls had moved in overnight. Something unspoken buzzed underneath every Slack message and hallway glance. I realized the moment I saw Caleb's face. He walked into the open space carrying his laptop and a cold brew, but the easy confidence he usually wore like a jacket was gone. His jaw was tense. His steps were clipped. His eyes scanned the room, searching until they landed on me. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He just said, "Lena, my office, now." The entire floor went silent. Even the AC seemed to hesitate. His office was really just a small room with glass walls, one of those phone booth-style pods meant for private calls. I stepped inside, and the door clicked shut behind me. "What did you tell HR?" he asked. Straight to it. No greeting, no warmth. "Nothing that wasn't true," I said. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "They're asking questions. Real questions. And they have the Slack message." "That wasn't my fault." "I know." He paused. "But it doesn't matter. Perception is its own reality here." There it was again, that word. Perception. The corporate curse. The thing that destroys people faster than mistakes ever could. He leaned closer, lowering his voice even though the glass wasn't soundproof. "I need you to be careful." "Careful how?" His eyes flicked downward, then back to mine. "People are watching us." A small electric panic surged through me. I stepped back. So did he, as if realizing how close he'd moved. "Caleb," I said slowly, "is there something you're not telling me?" His jaw tightened again. He opened his mouth to speak, but a shadow moved behind the glass. Brianna, walking by, looking in, watching. Her smile was faint, but her eyes glittered with something that made my stomach turn. Caleb saw her too. He straightened instantly, the conversation collapsing like a bridge cut at both ends. "That's all," he said quietly. "You can go." But as I reached for the door, he added, barely audible, "And Lena, don't trust everything you hear about me." I walked out with more questions than answers, heart pounding as if I'd just barely outrun something sharp. I didn't have time to process it before Logan pinged me on Slack. "Need you in the war room. Now. Major issue." When I walked in, Miles was already there, arms crossed, glaring at a wall of sticky notes like they'd personally offended him. Brianna stood beside him, sipping a LaCroix, acting bored. Logan gestured toward the whiteboard. "Okay, we have a problem. The client is asking why our prototype isn't matching the scope we agreed on. Something about last-minute changes." My blood ran cold. "What changes?" I asked. Logan tapped the board. "These." The flows on the board didn't look like any version I'd approved. Some screens were reordered, others were entirely replaced, and every change had timestamps attached. Late at night, past midnight, attributed to... Miles. And Caleb. Again. I felt the room tilt slightly, a nauseating déjà vu. "I didn't change these," I said firmly. Miles looked up then, eyes dark. "Neither did I. Not intentionally." "What does that mean?" Logan snapped. "It means," Miles said, jaw tight, "I was working on a separate branch. Caleb asked me to experiment with a new layout. I didn't realize it was a shared file." Brianna made a soft, pitying sound. "Easy mistake. Happens when you're distracted." Her eyes flicked between me and Miles with insulting subtlety. I felt heat rise up my neck. Miles turned toward her sharply. "You want to say something, Brianna?" "Me?" She widened her eyes innocently. "No, just pointing out that quality matters, especially when some people get special assignments." I saw the hit coming before it landed. This wasn't about the prototype. This was about me. Logan rubbed his forehead. "I don't care about politics. I care that the client is questioning our competence." He looked at me then. "Can you fix this before the end of the day?" I swallowed hard. "Yes." I hated that the room visibly relaxed when I said it, as if they'd expected me to crash and burn. Miles tried to catch my eye as the meeting ended, but I brushed past him. I didn't trust myself to speak without shaking. By late afternoon, I had rebuilt the prototype from scratch. My shoulders ached, my eyes were dry. I'd skipped lunch. The office was thinning out when I heard footsteps stop behind me. "Hey," Miles said softly. I didn't look up. "I'm busy." "I know, but we need to talk." "No, you need to stop interfering. You need to stop sending Slack messages that blow up my life." He flinched. "I was trying to protect you." "You're not protecting me," I said quietly. "You're making me a target." He ran a hand down his face. "Lena, I didn't think HR would weaponize the message. I thought that Caleb was manipulating me?" His silence was louder than words. I finally turned to him. "Do you think I don't know what I'm doing? Do you think I can't handle myself?" Miles opened his mouth, but nothing came out. And for the first time, I saw something vulnerable in him, something scary. "He's not who you think he is," Miles finally said. "And you are?" He stepped back as if I'd struck him. "I didn't mean for any of this. Intent doesn't matter," I said. "Impact does." The irony hurt even me. Before either of us could continue, a notification pinged on the big hallway monitor, the one tied to HR announcements. "Mandatory compliance review. All design team members tomorrow, 9 a.m. Attendance required." The office collectively sucked in a breath. This wasn't subtle. This wasn't casual. This was a warning shot. Brianna walked past just then, her smile razor thin. "See you all tomorrow," she said. And in that moment, everything fell into place. The whispers, the photo from the rooftop, the sudden scrutiny, the concerns raised to HR. This wasn't just office politics. This was a setup, a slow, careful trap. And I was already caught in the middle of it. The next morning, the sky over Manhattan was the color of steel, flat, cold, unforgiving. It matched the feeling in my stomach as I rode the elevator to the 10th floor. No one spoke. No one made eye contact. It was as if the entire building already knew what was about to happen. When the doors opened, a silent crowd funneled toward the large conference room, our so-called innovation hub, though today it felt more like a courtroom. The glass walls made everything visible: the long table, the projector screen, the scattered notebooks, the tight faces of my coworkers settling into seats they wished they didn't need to fill. Caleb sat near the front, shoulders squared, but his eyes flicked toward me the moment I entered. Miles was farther down the table, arms crossed, staring at his hands. Brianna was next to Logan, posture perfect, expression serene, like someone coming to watch the consequences of her own calculations. HR was there too. Olivia sat at the head of the table, laptop open, pen poised. She nodded at me in a way that pretended to be kind. "Let's begin," she said, her voice crisp, the room falling into a suffocating stillness. She started with vague language, team dynamics, crossed wires, concerns raised through anonymous channels. Then she clicked a button, and the projector lit up. My stomach clenched. On the screen was the Slack message. Miles' message. The one that detonated everything. Displayed in bright white text, huge, impossible to look away from. "Don't let Caleb talk you into late-night revisions. He just wants excuses to keep you alone." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Others stared at me with barely masked curiosity. Olivia looked directly at me. "Lena, we'd like to hear your perspective on this." I swallowed, my throat dry. I didn't ask for that message. I didn't expect it, and I didn't respond to it. Brianna leaned forward, voice smooth as silk. "But you did spend many late nights with Caleb, didn't you?" The words sliced cleanly. I felt Caleb stiffen beside her. "Those were project deadlines," he said sharply. "Not personal." "Optics matter," Brianna replied. There it was again. Optics, the weapon she wielded so effortlessly. Olivia clicked to the next slide. A photo. The rooftop photo. Caleb and me, standing too close, string lights behind us. My head slightly turned toward him, his posture angled toward mine. Not explicit, not incriminating, but intimate enough to twist any narrative in the wrong hands. A chill rippled across the table. Olivia's tone softened artificially. "Lena, this image was submitted anonymously. We need clarity so the team can move forward safely." I felt every pair of eyes land on me. I felt the building itself watching. For a moment, I thought I might break. But then something steadied inside me. Not strength exactly, but something sharper. Something tired of bending, tired of being blamed for proximity, talent, or simply existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. I inhaled slowly. "I'll be clear," I said, my voice surprising even me. "I've never had a relationship with my manager. I've worked late because I was asked to deliver difficult work under tight deadlines. And I'm here today because people chose to interpret professionalism as something else." I looked directly at Brianna. "Some people more than others." Her smile twitched. I wasn't done. "And while we're discussing optics," I continued, turning toward Olivia, "we should talk about Figma history." A subtle ripple of confusion moved through the room. I clicked my laptop. Screen share illuminated the projector again. "This," I said, highlighting timestamps, "is the version history from the prototype that failed during usability testing. You'll see changes pushed close to midnight, not by me, but by both Caleb and Miles." Gasps, small but real. Logan leaned forward. "Wait, what?" You thought it was my responsibility," I said, "because that's what you were led to believe." My voice didn't shake now. It rang. "And this," I added, switching tabs, "is the Slack log showing Brianna sharing the rooftop photo to a private side channel, captioned, 'Tell me again this is just mentorship.'" The room frozen. Brianna's face was drained of color. "That's taken out of context." "Context," I said gently, "is exactly the point." Miles looked at me with something like shock. Caleb looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time, not as someone he'd chosen to mentor, but as someone capable of destroying the narrative being built around her. Olivia exhaled slowly. "We will need to review all of this." But I wasn't finished. Not yet. "One more thing," I said, closing my laptop. "I won't be speaking for anyone else in this room, but I'll speak for myself." I looked around at them, all the people who had whispered, speculated, judged, watched. I don't owe anyone here an apology for doing my job well. I don't owe anyone an explanation for tones, glances, or rumors they invented, and I refuse to carry the consequences of narratives I didn't create. The silence that followed was thick, electric, and, finally, not pointed at me. I felt my breathing steady. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't afraid. Not of HR, not of gossip, not of Caleb or Miles, not of the truth or the lies wrapped around it. Because I had something now, something they didn't expect: control. And I wasn't done using it. When the meeting finally ended, no one moved at first. It felt like the entire room had been cracked open and left to echo. Guilt, shock, defensiveness, all of it floating in the stale conference air. People filed out slowly, avoiding eye contact, avoiding each other, avoiding me most of all. Caleb stayed seated, elbows on the table, hands clasped. He looked drained, older, as if the past hour had peeled back a version of him he didn't want anyone to see. When I walked past, he said quietly, "Lena, thank you for telling the truth." I didn't answer, because the truth was more complicated than he understood, and gratitude wasn't going to fix anything now. Miles was waiting near the hallway, leaning against the wall like he wasn't sure whether to leave or stay. When he saw me, he straightened. "That was intense," he said softly. "You didn't have to defend me." "I didn't," I replied. "I just showed what happened." He nodded, eyes heavy. "I didn't mean for any of this to fall on you." But meaning didn't matter. Impact did, and he finally knew it. I walked past him, down the corridor humming with fluorescent lights, past desks still warm from morning coffee cups. The office looked the same as it always had, but something underneath it had shifted. People now knew I wasn't the quiet designer they thought they could shape into an easy scapegoat. They knew I kept receipts. They knew I could fight back. HR would start their formal review process next week. Brianna would have to explain the side channel chats. Caleb would be reassigned to avoid conflict of interest. Miles would be monitored more closely. And me? I would be given a new direct manager, a new feature to lead, and a polite request to focus on rebuilding trust. But later that night, as I sat on the subway home, train rattling, city blurring outside the window, my phone buzzed with a new email. Subject: confidential. From a senior executive I'd never spoken to. Inside was one line: "We need to discuss what you uncovered today. Privately." I read it twice, because this wasn't over, not even close. Someone higher up had been watching, and I had just become useful. If you've ever felt cornered at work, blamed for something you didn't do, or watched office politics twist the truth into something unrecognizable, make sure you subscribe. This story isn't finished. Not for me, and not for the people who tried to bury me today. Offices look polished from the outside, but behind every glass conference room, there's a mess just like this waiting to surface. Hit like, share this with someone stuck in a toxic workplace, and tell me in the comments what part hit you the hardest. I read everything. Your story might be next.